Well, hello again and welcome back to week 5 of our series on traditional history versus modern history. We're going to wrap it up today by looking at how the commercial and the military revolutions had influenced two different sections of the world. We're going to look at two very familiar ones. We're going to look at India, and then we're going to look at the northern section, or the British New World. And those are the two that we're going to do. So without further ado, let's dive into the part 1. We're going to look at India. So we're asking ourselves the question, how did these revolutions change the world, influence the world? How did they play out, so to speak, in real time? Not just on the books, not just on facts and figures, but where do we see it playing itself out? And so we're going to look at India first. If you remember, for this map that we had from way back at the beginning, Europe is using the commercial revolution and has spread out to two different parts. It is swept towards the east and settled in India and Southeast Asia and sort of planted roots along the coastal regions there. And it has also gone west and has planted roots in the northern part of the New World, particularly on the east coast of what we call America today, or the United States. So we're going to look first at the developments and the influence this commercial and military revolution had on India specific. I'm not going to go into Southeast Asia, but I think that if you look at what's happening in India, you can make some conclusions of what similar things would be happening in Southeast Asian islands. So let's take a look at what's going on here. If you look at about the mid-1700s, this map says 1756, you're going to see some purple, light purplish pink regions. These regions are being infiltrated, they're being established and settled, at least trade-wise, commercial-wise, by the British East Indian Company. So you can see like up near Bengal, which is up in the top northeast area, that pink there, they've made inroads into that particular region down the coast a little bit, the eastern coast. There's a little bit down a little bit farther, and then of course they have on the west coast. They have Bombay, and they actually were the ones that created that city, settled that city, and sort of developed it. So that's kind of what's going on. And of course, we still have the Maratha Confederacy. These are the ones that kind of took over the Mughal Empire and pushed them out. So there's still princes and powers that are going on here. France still has a presence at this time. But as the commercial revolution and military revolution expand and grow bigger as we moved into the second half of the 1700s, Britain is going to come out on top, and this is what they do. So initially, we got a trade monopoly. The King of England has a trade monopoly with the British East Indian Company to sort of settle these lands, these colonies, and have given the British East Indian Company that right. Remember our mercantile fiscal military triangle. King at the top has the trade monopolies, gives it to a company. The company gets money, starts investing and doing business in those colonies, those regions, and then kicks back money to the king, right? Well, this is an example of that. And Bengal, which is in that top left-hand or top right-hand side in the dark purple, that is kind of like the headquarters. They have put, the East Indian Company has put in charge a gentleman by the name of Robert Clive to build a headquarters in Bengal and sort of take over this region, make the East Indian Company bigger, stronger, wealthier. And that's what's going on at this time. Now, mind you, the French are still trying to do their business, and the princes and all of the different regions, they're still trying to get their benefit. So there's lots of situation perspectives from the British perspective, from the local perspective, from the princes who are in this region and kind of trying to maintain control their perspective, France's perspective. There's a lot of stuff going on if you were to look at that cycle of choices. What is the situation? Depending on the perspective, it can change perspective quite a bit. By the 1750s, Clive creates this huge opportunity for some of Bengali merchants. So he's kind of wheeling and dealing with the inside guys, the local inside merchants, making trade deals that may or may not benefit the princes. They may or may not benefit the region, the natives of that land, but it certainly makes the merchants a lot of money. He gives silver and guns and military advice to the locals, which makes sense because remember, the princes and the locals are trying to fight and take territory from the Mughal Empire, which is still up in the northern portion of this territory. And many of the Bengalis are supporting this sort of enterprise with Britain because Britain's making them mightier. They're looking to Britain for that military advice and advancement and technology because they want to win, of course. But if you look at this map, as time goes on, by the time you get into the early part of the 1800s, Britain pretty much controls anything that's pink or purple. So they're expanding. They're taking over this region. Well, of course, the French East Indian Company doesn't like that. That's another one of those company trade monopoly kind of folks. But this one works for the King of France. France and Britain, rivals for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. He's kind of going to side with the princes that would like to oppose the British coming in and taking over. So the French are going to take their commercial revolution gains, their military gains, and they're going to start feeding and supporting the princes and the locals that want to push Britain out. And of course, they want a cut, they want their part, they want their share of it too. So France is doing exactly what Britain's doing, but as they're fighting over who gets to play in India and who doesn't, they themselves are going to fight more and more. So even though France and Britain are advancing the military power of the locals, they themselves are starting to get in the way of one another, and that's not going to be good. So in 1757, there's this huge clash in a place called Plassey, which is near Bengal. It's in that top right-hand purple area. You can look at the map and find it. The French and the princes lose this battle. They lose it pretty bad, or badly. In fact, they lose it so badly that within a very short amount of time, France loses almost all influence in India, and Britain pretty much takes over all of the commercial interests in that area. And so France is pretty much out of the picture. By 1960, much of India and its resources are under British control. India's economies flip. Initially, they were the major exporter. I talked about this in a couple of videos ago. Their primary way of making money was to export raw goods, export products made from the various things, particularly cotton. But as life sort of changed and the British came in and took over, the British want their sort of commercial industry to be the strongest. So India becomes a major exporter of the raw goods, not the raw goods and the product, just the raw goods. They send the raw goods back to England. England puts it through their manufacturing, puts out clothes and all sorts of things. And then those clothes, those products come back in India. The natives become almost forced to buy the British goods. So India loses the revenue from producing its own goods by exporting the raw goods and then bringing back or buying back the finished products that are coming out of England. And that really turns India upside down. Bengal becomes this huge commercial region for the British East Indian Company. And I didn't put it on here, but they also appoint what they call a general governor. And the term, it really kind of tells you what it's all about. He is a general, which means he controls the military, and he's the governor, which means he also works with the all the different trade companies and things like that. He is the boss. He's the acting boss. British, of course, are going to work a little bit more with the locals. They're going to allow locals to rise to certain levels of official and power and sort of do their policing for them. The French, in their parts of the world, they are more take over the whole thing and put their own people in place. So between the two, you can kind of weigh, okay, well, which one is the better and which one is the worst? So in this case, the British are the ones that have taken over and are helping, I shouldn't say helping, they're using the locals to help keep and maintain what they have conquered, so to speak, or what they've taken over. So, go back to your cycle of choices. This brings up and creates new situations. They've come in, the British have come in, they've taken over. That was their choice. That was their solution to their problem of gaining access to this commercial endeavors out of India. They now have them, but now we have some problems that have popped up, new situations. How do they maintain it? How do they control it? How do they maintain peace? Things like that. So the British and the French are seen again as advanced military powers. So the locals, their situation is, well, what do we do about it? We have this invading force. We are not equipped to handle their advanced military. What do we do? Well, in India, many people decided that they were going to join or participate in this sort of takeover. They're going to become part. And that's why I said that the Indian locals were allowed to rise up to local powers of authority and work with the British. Did some, like the merchants, get a kickback? Yeah, absolutely. So some people within the native grouping, they sort of rise to power and they get a little bit more money. They're a little bit better off, but they're sort of like the Judas. They're kind of in between the enemy, who's the British, and the good guys who are the locals. Britain, on the other hand, they become this major military advisor to smaller and underdeveloped countries. Other developed countries are starting to look to Britain, as well as France, but primarily Britain in this time, for advice, for contracts, for negotiations, for how can you help us rise to power. You're going to see this in a big way in Africa. India is going to sign over its governance to the British East Indian Company. So the whole nation, so to speak, the whole people group are going to literally turn their country over to the CEO of this big monopoly company called the British East Indian Company. So, who become the new players in the East? Well, it looks like Britain's going to become a big one. They're definitely going to become a big one moving into the 1800s. And will that create some problems and opportunities that they're going to have to face? Yeah, definitely. We're going to see a lot of conflict come out of that region. We're going to find it coming out of Africa as well. So those are things that are going to pop up as we move from how the commercial and military revolution has helped Britain sort of get into these places, particularly in India, and sort of take over, become the dominant force there. And that's going to have repercussions too. That's going to have some backlash. And we're going to see that in the next learning section, the next series of videos. And how India, the people of India are going to say, do you know what? This is not quite right. This isn't fair. It's not balanced. And they're going to try to seek that balance again. And of course, that means more wars and revolutions. So where else? Where else do we go? Well, we've all looked at the New World. We looked at that in previous videos. Since we're focusing on Britain right now, we're going to shift over in our next video. We're going to shift over to the New World. What's going on in the New World, and how do we see that commercial military advancement and explosion kind of influence the workings of what will become the United States of America. So we'll see you then.